Hello, dear friends. It's Motzei Shabbat, Parashat Acharai-Kedoshim, 2026. I'd like to say some things that I said today in the synagogue. We have a double parasha, Acharai-Kedoshim, which is taken from Leviticus, from Vayikra, and there are some, of course, similarities to the parshiot. It talks about certain things like the illegitimate or the prohibited sexual relations within the family, brother, sister, father, daughter, mother, son, things like that, and other things too. And it talks about, of course, the Yom Kippur service and various offerings, and also in Kedoshim, it talks about the laws, what I call the social laws of Judaism in a Jewish society. But the interesting thing is, towards the end of each parasha, there is a common motif. I'd like to talk about that right now. For instance, when we read the end of Achrei, this is Vayikra 18:28. So it says, "V'lo taki etchem haaretz b'tamachem ota," which is translated. I guess I would have to take for all the abominations above, the people of the land who before you had done, and the land was defiled by them. But the land will vomit out anybody who defiles it. And it can vomit you out too if you defile it, just as it vomited out the nations that were before you. For whoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the persons that commit them shall be cut off from their people. Therefore, keep my ordinances, that you commit not any of these abominable customs which were practiced before you. So basically, it says in the end of Achrei that God basically expelled the Canaanite nations before Israel because of the practices that they did, and practices of child sacrifice, and practices of various sexual abominations, etc., and different decadent things and decay in the society. And therefore, and if you do these things too, you could also be vomited out from the land. And it says at the end of Kedoshim something very similar. Also, this is chapter 20, from verse 23. Lo telchu b'chukot hagoy. Even before this, from verse 22. It says, Ushmartem et chukotai, you shall keep my precepts and my commandments, and you shall do them, so that the land not vomit you out. Because this is the land I'm bringing you to. Do not go in the ways of the nations that I am sending out before you, because all of these terrible things they did, and I despised it. And therefore I'm telling you, you are going to inherit their land. And I am giving it to you as an inheritance, the land of milk and honey. For I am God, and I have divided you, separated you from the nations. And just like I have also separated you from eating animals that are impure. And you shall be holy, because I, God, am holy. And I separated you from the nations to be mine, etc. But again, this idea that the land was defiled by the nations who were before. And it says, "V'lo taki etchem haaretz," so the land not vomit you out like it did to the previous nations. So I want to try to understand this, what exactly it means in this context. So Israel's coming into the land, which God promised them. We left Egypt, and Moses said many times, the goal is to get to the land. Now, we were supposed to get to the land directly. However, because of the Chet HaMeraglim, which was the sin of the 12 spies, who 10 of them said bad things about the land, we were forced to stay for 40 years in the desert, so that generation died out, so that a new generation, and the new generation who did not see what happened in Egypt, because that generation who saw the plagues, who saw the miracles that God did, they should have known better than to say things like that. and that generation had to die out, and a new generation would come into the land with Joshua. But let's think for a moment. So God says you're going to take over the land. And he says that I expelled these nations before you. Now, we know that the nations were there. But first of all, God is giving a reason why he's expelling the nations. He's expelling the nations because of all the atrocities, all of the moral atrocities they did, like child sacrifice of the Molech, like all the various paganism that they did, like the sexual uh, um, decadence that went on among the societies of Canaan. And because of this, we were expelled. Now, this is interesting. So that means that when God brings us into the land, he's also saying that those people, that I'm pushing them out of the land. How is he pushing them out of the land? Because he told Israel to push them out of the land. Now, of course, the Israelites may say, maybe we don't feel comfortable like this. I know we understand you gave us the land. God's saying here twice in Vayikra, both in chapter 18 and in 20, I want them out. I don't want them there anymore. They don't deserve to be there. And I'm writing it in this book of Leviticus twice, so nobody should doubt. And this was my decision. If it didn't happen by you, it would have happened by somebody else. And there are many cases in the Bible of a nation being expelled by wars, and the Bible says God stood behind them, like we had in chapter 13 and 14 in Genesis 2, where the Babylonians came against five cities. So what is happening here? Now, one of the interesting things is that you could say like this, because why can't God just say to Israel, you know what? You're going into the land of Canaan. So I want you to know that it's okay, because I told you to go into the land. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Why does God have to give the reason why he's expelling the Canaanite nations? Because he wants to cover the angles, and he wants the Israelites to know, you're going to the land because it's your land, because I promised it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But you're also going into the land despite the fact that there are people there, because those people, I don't want them in the land. And I was just waiting for the moment to expel them. And they will be vomited out. So also be careful when you're in the land that you're not vomited out, because in that land you have to be at a certain moral level to live in that land. As we know, twice we were expelled from the land. Once was in the Babylonian exile for 70 years. The second time with the Roman exile, which lasted for 2,000 years until we came back and had our own state in 1948. So, yes, we were vomited out of the land twice because we believed that whatever the Babylonians did to us, whatever the Romans did to us, it was a price we had to pay because our relationship with God. And for history, there's also meta-history going on. But God's saying that the Canaanites, you're not fighting them. The Canaanites I'm going to expel them from the land before you. So what's going on here is that God is legitimizing this act in both ways. Number one, I created the world. I'm giving you that land. I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I don't go back on my word. And the Canaanites, don't worry about them. They don't deserve it. From the way they act, they should not be in the land. It's just a matter of time that they won't be. Now, another interesting thing, which I want to continue on this idea, because the same thing happens in the Second Temple. In the Second Temple, after the Babylonian exile, where the Jews are supposed to go back after 70 years as Jeremiah promised them, and this was the fallen kingdom of Judah, so at this point they're called Jews, from the descendants of Judah, the son of Israel, and of course the Kohanim, the Levites, and Benjamin. So they're promised that they're going to come back after 70 years, but after 70 years, they're not sure how it's going to happen. And Cyrus, Koresh, the king of Persia, the first king of Persia, makes a public decree, which is mentioned twice in the Bible, the end of Chronicles 2, Divrei Hamim, and also in the book of Ezra, decreeing that the Jews can go back to their land and build up Jerusalem and build up the temple. And so it's written twice in our Bible that this is the way it's going to go. Now, you might say, if God said after 70 years we go back, we should just go back. But God is also setting the stage And he's bringing a King Cyrus who's going to make it completely legal so that nobody should have a doubt that we're allowed to be in our indigenous land, even if time went by and 70 years went by. And we go back. Not everybody, but enough. And they're listed in the book of Ezra, in the book of Nehemiah, the ones who went back to the land. And the funny thing is that Rav David Kimchi, the Radak, writes in the Rav David Kimchi, known as the Radak, a Bible commentator writing at the beginning of the 13th century. He says that when the Jews come back to the land eventually, after the Roman exile, after the 2,000 years, of course, he didn't know it would be 2,000 years because he lived in the 12th and 13th century. But he says they will come back, B'rishyon umot haolam. The nations will officially authorize it. And he's writing this in the early 13th century. And the Vilna Gaon, known as Elijah ben Shlomo Zalman, writing in Vilna in the 18th century, he says, just like Cyrus, he says this on his commentary to Tikkun Zohar Chadash, just like Cyrus gave a special declaration that the Jews are allowed to go back to Jerusalem and build it up, the same thing will happen in the future when the Jews are the end of this exile and we go back to the land of Israel. The same thing will happen. Both of them predicted the Balfour Declaration, where the British Commonwealth, which after World War I was given the mandate over the area that was called Palestine, which was at the time a large area, wrote a special declaration by Lord Balfour in the name of Her Majesty, of His Majesty, of course, at the time it was George, that the Jews can have their homeland in the land of Israel. And then, of course, the homeland was split, but that's already going into the politics of what happened into Transjordan and Israel. But the point is that in all three cases, so of the Jews coming into the land, both in the biblical, in the 5 books of Moses, and in the what's called the later writings, the hagiographa, the reasons they have these mandates, one of the Bible is God saying, I wanted those people to leave. I want the Jews to be there. And the hagiographa Cyrus says, I want them to go. They can do it. And then Balfour saying in the Balfour Declaration, it's very interesting. God covers all the angles, even though theoretically, if it's our land, why can't we just take it over? Because he doesn't want anybody to have something to say to criticize. Now, despite that, of course, there's always criticism because people want to criticize, they'll make it up. That's all. There are 3 places that the Midrash says in the land of Israel that the Bible says we paid for. Abraham, in the book of Genesis, pays for the Marat HaMachpelah, the cave of Machpelah, where he buries Sarah. And it is disputed today. Okay? The Arabs say it's ours. He was paid for by Abraham. And it's in the Bible that he paid for it, for his children. The second one is Goren Aravna, which is the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount was paid for by King David. It was the barn of Aravna. He paid Aravna, and it says in the book of Kings how much money he paid for it. I think it was actually in Samuel, how much money he paid for it. And it was acquired legally. And the third one is Nabla Shechem, which Jacob acquired for 100 ksita. It says so in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, for his children. So these 3 places that the Bible testifies that they were paid for in full. These are the ones that the nations are saying, oh, what are you doing? So there's nothing you can do. Even when the Bible records that we paid for it, that God wanted us to be there, that there was an imperial decree by Cyrus, and even today where there was the Balfour Declaration, everything was fine. All of a sudden, the indigenous people are invaders. Or somebody said, there's a young woman who I don't remember her name, Canadian, who is from an indigenous background of the First Nations. And she says, unfortunately, people don't realize that what's happening in Israel is the only example of decolonialization, because we're coming back to our indigenous land after 2,000 years. But people have never seen that before. You showed them decolonialization in front of their eyes, they wouldn't even recognize it. So that's basically what's happening. But I want to go further than that and try to understand something here. So God is actually telling us that these nations, don't worry about them. They're not supposed to be there. That was part of my plan. Well, if that was part of God's plan, God has many ways to do things. God could have sent the Babylonians to attack them, and then they would have been gone. Why is he waiting for the people of Israel to come and to fight with them during the time of Joshua? According to our commentators, including Rashi, Moses says in Deuteronomy that originally God said, Bo urshu haaretz, go and inherit the land, which means you might even not even have to fight them. Because when God wills something, it just happens. But after the Chetem Raglim, after the sin of the 12 spies, where only Joshua and Caleb said that we can do it, don't worry, and all the rest we're not sure, they seem to be giants, etc., which was considered a terrible sin. God is giving you something and saying, this is where you have to go. You go. And because of that sin, the Israelites had to prove that they wanted the land. To prove it, you have to fight for it. So first we had to fight Amalek, the Amalekites. Then we had to fight Sichon, the king of Heshbon. And then we had to fight Og, the king of the Bashan. And then we had to fight Jericho, and we had to fight Ai and the 31 kings in the book of Joshua who were defeated by Joshua in the land, because we have to prove that we really want it. And it seems to be that this is what happened too with the early state of Israel. We had the Balfour Declaration, which was an act of God, the fact that such a thing could have happened. And you had the UN, which also voted on the partition, which the Arabs didn't accept, but the Jews did. But we had to fight for the land because our neighbors, no matter when we showed the deed in the title, and despite the fact that in their Quran it says that we're indigenous to the land and that belongs to the children of Israel at least 10 times. Despite that, we had to fight for the land. And we still have to, because we have to show that we want this present that God gave us. And this present that God gave us through Abraham and through Isaac and through Jacob and through Moses and through Joshua, that we don't take lightly. And we're willing to pay the price to take our biblical place in this land. And we hope that all the nations will support us in doing such things, as we are trying to be decolonialists and go back against all those who try to kick us out, whether it was the Babylonians or the Romans or the ones who took over our temple, like the Greeks. And after the Romans, the various empires, the Mamelukes and the Byzantines and the Turks and all the various empires that were here, who occupied the land over that 2,000 years until the people of Israel came back. And as it said, and may God bless all those who support our existence here in the land of Israel. And I understand that it's difficult for people to see biblical prophecies coming to fruition. It seems like a strange thing. But you have to understand one thing, and this is an important one. The Maharal of Prague says that the reason why the Israelites had to be in Egypt for hundreds of years was that we had to experience our opposite. To know who you are as a people, you have to experience another people who believes in the antithesis of everything you believe in. The Egyptian culture was a culture which worshiped the dead. They actually had a book called the Book of the Dead of what's going to happen. The pharaohs used to prepare in advance for what's going to happen after death. And there was immorality in the culture. as you remember in the Bible, where Pharaoh stole Abraham's wife, not just the king of Gerar in the book of Genesis. So a lot of things in Egyptian culture, and of course the paganism and the sexual cults and as I said, the book of the dead. Whereas Judaism is about life. And the Torah is called the Torah of life. It's called the tree of life. Eitz Chaim. And the Torah says, V'chai behem, that these are the commandments by which a man has to learn how to live. And to this day, Jews, whether religious or not, we believe in life. We believe in celebrating life. Despite all the difficulties and vicissitudes over our history, we believe in life. Surrounding us, unfortunately, there are elements, and I don't believe that all the Islam is this way, but there are radical elements that believe in death. There are death cults. The Shiites, unfortunately, in Iran have turned into a death cult. The Muslim Brotherhood among the Sunnis have turned into a death cult. This has been recognized by our neighbors too, who to their dismay this has happened. So we are fighting a death cult, but we believe in life. And I believe that the day will come, sooner than later, that our neighbors will join us in our belief in life and will join us in our belief in the one God, in transforming this world into a better place in the face of God. Shalom, shalom.